Writing comics can be a daunting and sometimes difficult task, but one thing that helps to make writing comics just a little easier is learning and understanding some basic guidelines that I'm going to teach you. Hi, I'm Storm and I'm an award-winning independent comic book writer and artist, although I do prefer the term graphic novelist. Today I'm going to be going over some guidelines that have helped me and many others to write scripts for comics and graphic novels. These guidelines are designed to help strengthen your writing as well as being able to communicate your story in such a way that you won't have the artist pulling his hair out trying to figure out how to transfer everything you have written onto one single page. On top of that, if you're looking to submit your script to a publisher in the near future, then these guidelines will help to make it harder for the editor to reject your submission. But remember, these guidelines are not hard and fast rules, and there are many famous artists and writers who break and bend these guidelines all the time. But it's best to learn these guidelines like a pro so that you can break them like an artist. If we take a single blank comic book page, we can see instantly that the minimum number of panels we could draw on that page is 1, also known as a splash page. Use splash pages sparingly. They are great to use for a reveal or a twist in the story, and they are highly effective as a bookend to each act or chapter of your story. But even though we know the minimal amount of panels we can fit on a page is 1, what is the maximum amount of panels we can fit on one single comic book page? Alan Moore, the writer of Watchmen, The Killing Joke and V for Vendetta, likes to use a 9-panel grid, meaning that he won't go above 9 panels per page. But Alan Moore has had many years' experience working with publishers as well as a large and loyal fan base. And while some writers have produced work where up to 12 panels are collected on one single page, the majority of editors and artists find it extremely difficult to work with such a large amount of panels. So on average, the maximum amount of panels you should dedicate to a single comic book page is between 5 and 7. Space on a single page should be looked at as prime real estate. The space is limited and overcrowding the page can diminish the entertainment value for a reader. While you cannot control the speed at which the reader turns the page or consumes the content of the page, you can still to some extent control the pacing of the story. This is done by carefully choosing the number of panels that appear on a page. The rule of thumb is simple. If you want the pace of the story to be quick, then you use fewer panels to a page. Frank Miller's Sin City, The Long Hard Goodbye, is considered to be a very fast-paced story, and this is due to the fact that Miller rarely, if ever, used more than 3 panels to a page while keeping his dialogue and narration to a minimum. If you want the pacing of your story to slow down or be slower overall, then this can be accomplished by using more panels to a page. So if you have a dialogue-heavy exposition scene where the characters involved will be conveying important information that the reader will benefit from digesting slowly, then adding an extra panel or 2 will help with that, depending on just how much dialogue there is, of course. Similar to panels, we know that the minimum amount of balloons or narration boxes we can fit in a panel is 0. Not every panel benefits from having a word balloon or narration box. But let's say that you've come to a point in your story where narration or dialogue will be necessary. What is the maximum amount of balloons or narration boxes you should dedicate to a panel? Regardless of whether you're using a combination of word balloons and narration boxes or just one or the other, the magic number is 3. You will occasionally find yourself in a position where your story will benefit from squeezing in a 4th word balloon, and this is fine. As I said earlier, these are not hard and fast rules, but it's best to try and stick to 3 as a maximum because the more word balloons you add to a panel, the bigger the panel is, which leads to there being less room on the page for any other panels, which can seriously harm your story. A great example of this comes from a comic that was written by Rob Zombie called The Nail. In the first issue, there is a panel that is meant to show a conversation that is taking place between several characters who are in a moving van. But because of the large amount of word balloons used, we only get to see the exterior of the van while it is travelling, which means that it's difficult to tell what order the dialogue should be read in and which character is saying what. And that's the sort of practice that will make a reader put the book down and never read it again. But let's not forget about the words themselves. You don't need me to tell you that the more words in a balloon or balloons will make them bigger, which will lead to the panels being bigger and therefore meaning that fewer panels will fit on a single page. But regardless of whether you have 3 word balloons in every panel or if you have 1 balloon on the entire page, there is still a limit to how much dialogue or narration can be placed inside of the word balloons and narration boxes. So, what is the maximum amount of words you can fit inside of a word balloon or narration box? This is something that has been the subject of debate for many comic book writers. While some will stick to the limit of 25 words, others will argue that you can go up to 35 words if not 40. So a good rule of thumb, especially if you plan on submitting your script to a publisher or editor, is 30. But if you have trouble condensing sentences of dialogue to this short amount, then remember that you can push it to 35, but only if it's necessary. Believe it or not, regardless of whether the reader is an avid fan of your comic and character, or if it's the first time they have ever had any interaction with your book, the reader will need to be given a reason to turn the page. Otherwise, the temptation to close the book and put it down will take hold, and if the reader does that before getting to the end of your story or issue, then chances are they may never pick it up again and may not even get a hold of future issues or titles. That's why it's important to use page-turning devices in your story. A page-turning device is a moment in the story, scene, or even a transition from one scene to the next that takes place at the end of the page that needs to be turned by the reader in order for them to continue consuming the story. The pages that need to be turned are always odd-numbered pages. Page 1, page 3, page 5, page 7, and so on. A page-turning device can range from a line of dialogue to an action about to happen, such as a character swinging a baseball bat at another character's head, but the bat hasn't made contact, which means that there is a 50-50 chance that the character with the bat will succeed in striking their opponent. The only way to find out which outcome takes place is to turn to the following page where the results of this action will be displayed on the first panel. But as mentioned, you can also use dialogue to create a page-turning device. For example, maybe a female character is pushing a male character for information that they need in order to move forward with obtaining their goals within the story, but the male character is reluctant to give away any information. However, in the last panel, maybe the male character says something to the effect of, "Do you really want to know why I didn't turn up to our wedding?" Having the character ask a question like this gives the reader a reason to be intrigued, and the only way to settle that feeling is to turn to the next page. Another page-turning device that is effective when the turn of the page will work as a transition from one scene to the next is to use a narration or caption box in the final panel that contains the beginning of the first line of dialogue from the next scene. A great example of this technique being used isn't actually a comic book example, but an animation example. And that would be from the show Archer. In later seasons and episodes of the show, it wouldn't be uncommon for the viewer to see a scene wrap up while the dialogue from the next scene blends in, making an almost seamless transition. On top of this, the writers of the show would often make the scene end with a certain line of dialogue so that the dialogue from the next scene that bleeds over would sound as if the character was responding to what had been said even though they were not in the same scene. Here's an example of what I mean.
But I do still believe there's some things that only God should do.
Like give you an erection?
I'm assuming you mean give me the ability to have an erection?
Also yes.
No!
Yes, Lana.
We don't need a
Rocket launcher, sì, molto pronto.
This technique can really help bring your comic book script and the comic itself to life in a unique way, but it's best to use this technique sparingly. The idea of a page-turning device is to create a mini cliffhanger at the end of each odd-numbered page, and if you use the same technique too often, then the reader will subconsciously get used to this technique, causing it to become less and less effective as the story moves forward. And there you have it, plenty of guidelines to help you write a leaner, tighter, and exceptionally entertaining comic book script that will bring your exciting and passionate story to life in a way that will keep many comic book readers happy. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this video and that the advice I have given you has helped you along your journey in writing comics. If it has, then please feel free to share this video with anyone who you feel may benefit from this information. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button in order to stay up to date with my latest videos, and feel free to head on over to my website and preferred social media platforms in order to stay up to date with my latest projects, links to which can be found in the description box down below. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, enjoy writing those comic book scripts, and stay awesome.